welcome to the first ever edition of the Adobe Community Chat series of webinars and podcasts. I'm Brent Peterson, and I have Deryck Harlick here as my co-presenter. And we are here to talk exclusively about Adobe and all of its fantastic products, with the exclusion of its design and desktop products. So, Deryck, do you want to help clarify the point that I've just made a huge confusion about?
Yeah, so we're not talking about Photoshop and everything else like that, which is a funny, whenever I have tell people that I do training for Adobe, they immediately think that I'm training people on Photoshop and the likes. But this is all the commercial products, the Adobe Experience products. Which we all know. Anyone who's on this podcast will know that. But yeah,
right. And
that's the clarity point now.
Yes, and a preference that this is podcast number 1, and
under this name.
Bear with us, and we will get to the points we need to get to, and we're looking forward to a great series of interviews with Adobe community members. And our next one is going to be very soon before Meet Magento New York, and it's going to be Marcia Naidu from Mage Mojo, who will be our very first guest on Adobe Community Chat. And also we're going to have some intro music. It's going to be super fantastic.
Might have some lighting in the background flashing.
Yeah, we'll have lasers.
Yep. Yeah. Oh, sharks with lasers.
Yeah, so Madeline has said that she would like sharks. So we will have sharks with lasers, and it's going to be fantastic.
Mm-hmm.
And will be available on the Apple and the Google Play and other places that podcasts exist. Yeah. All right. So let's, Madeline, what do we got next here? Let's get started.
Yeah, next up we just have who you guys are.
Yeah, we've introduced ourselves. So my name is Brent Peterson. I'm a Magento Master and an Adobe Business Practitioner. And I've also helped write a few of the tests that Adobe does for Magento. Deryck?
Yeah, so I'm Deryck Harlick. I am a trainer, primarily, so I train on quite a few of the merchant courses for Adobe Digital Learning Services, and it says that I am a subject matter expert, but that's slightly wrong. I'm just an expert, apparently, according to Adobe. I'm not a subject matter expert. There's a difference. Which I'm still trying to work out what the difference is, but there is a difference. So yeah, that's basically me.
Yeah, and we are going to go over some of the name changes that Magento has done, or Adobe has done, on the Magento items, and talk a little bit about especially the architect badge that you can get when you pass the Developers Plus test. All right, Madeline. All right, so the first thing we have up here is Magento Events. And again, no in-person events yet, but we do have some exciting events, and there's now a lot more. But Meet Magento New York is happening on October 30th. MeetMagento.nyc. Tickets are available, and I believe the speaker call for speakers is still open. I saw that Meet Magento Poland is also now available at the end of October. And then Meet Magento Mexico on November 6th is happening in Mexico, but of course, virtually. Madeline, tell us a little bit about Meet Magento Mexico.
Yeah, so this is our first year organizing Meet Magento Mexico, or Magento organizing it. In the past, it was organized by a different agency. It'll be a smaller event, just 4.5 hours, 2 tracks, business and tech. We have some great sponsors lined up to do some great talks, and we're looking forward to having the event and seeing how it goes virtually. It's a new experience for everyone.
Yeah, and I think the one thing that this event will primarily be in Spanish. So I have been practicing telling my Spanish jokes. And I know everybody's looking forward to that, my Spanish jokes. Just as an addendum, we have done Mage Titans Mexico for the last 4 years. So it's not that we haven't done events in Mexico. This will be our first time with the Meet Magento event in Mexico.
So what time's that starting in Mexico on? I'm thinking, I've got my European head on trying to work out what that would be in.
We'll be starting at noon Central Time, and we'll be ending at 4:30.
Right. Okay. So anyone in Spain would be able to kind of get on at about 4 or 5 o'clock in the evening.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's quite handy. One thing I do, is I hate the fact there's not in-person events at the moment. I think a lot of us do, but on the flip side of that is that it is significantly easier to go to these events, wherever they are in the world when now they're virtual. There's no kind of barrier to that. So there's swings and roundabouts on these things.
Yeah, and we did get a question. Marcia has joined us. We are going to use Hublia. Is that right, Madeline?
Hublio.
Yeah. So I did attend Meet Magento Indonesia. They used that platform, and it was a very good experience. All right. Go ahead, Madeline. All right, so we did, this will be a pre-recorded. Coming up in the future, we won't be doing this as a live event. We will be doing this as a pre-recorded event, and we plan on having a number of interviews with Adobe community members. It will be around 45 minutes, and we will make it available on the podcast streams.
Mm-hmm.
So we are inviting anybody in the community to help us to know what you want to hear about, and especially what we're looking for is some of the things that Adobe and Magento come together on. More specifically, I think that we have been doing some training around Magento Cloud, and there has been a lot of questions about how Adobe Enterprise or AEM, Adobe Experience Manager fits in that scenario. So we do want to invite people from all the communities to help and join us. Not separating Magento and Adobe, but trying to bring those people together and having some conversations around how both of those new communities can help us understand what we could be doing as a bigger community.
Yeah, because there's a lot of, there's a lot of components now that are so I think we'll always be looking at e-commerce and then what joins into the e-commerce element. Well, that's certainly, but yeah, you've got Experience Manager, and then obviously there's Sensei, and there's all these other components that are there, and it would be just, I think, for everyone to start broadening their knowledge, because it's going to be naturally where Magento and the whole Adobe side of things is going anyway. Whereas maybe traditionally in the past Magento was just its thing, those lines are getting blurred, more and more blurred. So hopefully we can start reflecting that in this.
Yeah, and we did have a client conversation this morning around adding a headless version or some headless content to Magento. And I pointed out that Experience Manager fits that need very well. And I think there is a lot of there's a lot of things that we can be doing that we all will learn how to do, and put those good practices into use. So again, like as this, we're saying here that we're not just looking for developers, but we're also looking for merchants to join us. And I think that the conversation between merchants and developers can help us to better bring solutions that work on both sides, so developers can understand what merchants want, and merchants can understand what developers can do. That's not to say that sometimes that gets a little bit blurred when developers talk in strict developer talk, but there's a lot of things that we can learn together as a team. And I know Deryck specifically, doing a lot of training, encounters merchants that would like to do things. And Deryck, I know that you've even had experience around, say Page Builder, and how Page Builder will handle a lot of those development tasks.
Yeah. I mean, again, kind of like a case that came up, fairly recently, where Page Builder is is a great product that was added to Magento, big fanfare. In fact, there was a lot of pent up, excitement about Page Builder coming out, and there it is. But and from a admin practical point of view, it's great. But if that's not tied up properly with your front end developer, actually executing it in the right way, or understanding what it is that the merchant wants, then actually it's causing a whole load of different headaches. So if there's design issues that you've got in you're doing something in the back end of Page Builder in the admin, and it's not being reflected on the front end, then you need your front-end developer to understand that you want a fix for that. You want that, you need that built into your design. So yeah, there's all sorts of, this is why merchants and developers, it's so key that they do have that dialogue that's going on. And they both need to understand each other to a certain extent. It's no good the merchant just expecting the developer to have a complete understanding of what it is they want, and vice versa. There needs to be that dialogue going on, that somewhere in the middle. That was the whole point of solution specialists as well, actually, back when that was what solution specialists are called. Now they're Magento Commerce business practitioners, is to have that communication between the two. But
Yeah, exactly. So I think the key there is that the developers understand when something should be done in, let's say, Page Builder, and they shouldn't be recreating something in CSS or making special templates that have to be pushed to a server. And in the same sense that merchants need to understand what they should be doing, and maybe that some of the things that they could be doing in terms of design can be done directly in Page Builder, and they don't need the help of a developer. And in this case, the conversation came up around adding a third-party CMS system. And the fact is that even if you do add a third-party CMS, that system is still going to have to work within the limits of whatever Magento can do. And if you have a specific design item that doesn't fit that other system, that somebody's still going to have to build out that design. So why not just use Page Builder?
Yeah, and the what you're saying there about the CSS and those kind of fixes. So what you might end up having is a merchant saying, well, this isn't lined up properly, and for example, there's a button not lined up properly, and every time that button's placed, it's not lined up properly. And so you may end up getting a quick fix put in place that fixes that problem, and it's a bit of CSS. But the next time, or there might be a slightly different scenario where that button needs to be put in, and it's still not lined up properly. And the quick fix is the quickest way of sorting that problem out, but in the long term, it's still going to cause frustration for the merchant. So so where the merchant needs to understand is that the quick fix will get it fixed for now, but what they want is the proper fix, which is going to take more time, but it means in the future that problem is less likely to occur again.
Yeah, and I think, I'm sure what you've learned in doing training for the last 10 years is that there is a gap in terms of Magento and how the content is delivered to merchants and what the merchant should expect. So this Magento Commerce Business Practitioner specialization that you can get from Adobe, which was the Magento Solution Specialist, is meant to kind of bridge that gap. So you should this Magento Commerce Business Practitioner, I'm going to keep saying that over and over again so I remember it. They should understand when something can be done in Magento and when you do need the help of a front-end developer to get those things done. And that I believe that role is often overlooked at the agency level. Yeah. And that oftentimes, even at the developer level, so if you're a single developer working on a project, there are a lot of things that can be done in admin that maybe is overlooked because a front-end developer always does something a certain way. And it's really good to kind of loop back and take a look at what is being done in your front end and your admin, and assessing how those are being done.
I think there's a couple of things that come up there, that in my experience that comes up quite often. One, and that is the front end developer maybe underestimates the skill of the potential skill of the client. So they assume that there's no technical knowledge. So, asking them to be able to put some content in and place it within Page Builder, or whatever it is a bridge too far for them because they're not technical at all. And that's not the case. They're not fully they're not, developers, but that doesn't mean that they can't format stuff. And on the other side as well, I think that quite often there's a knowledge gap on the developer, which is what you're capable of doing within the back end and within the admin. And sometimes that is, overlooked, because you will often get developers who've got their developer certifications, but the developer certification doesn't really require you to have a massive knowledge of the actual product itself. You need to understand how the code is structured and how you access certain points and things that developers need to know, but it's not necessarily about the functionality. And so often there's that knowledge gap there as well, which is, the merchant knows the functionality, the developer knows how to develop it, but there's this big gap in the middle, and that's bridging that gap constantly is part of the challenge.
Yeah, and I think, to be honest or transparent, Page Builder is still relatively new in the scope of what Magento is doing, and people aren't used to having a tool like this. And in the same sense, the tool is new, so there's a lot of things that can be improved on, and we are seeing improvements every single release of Magento.
Yeah, it is definitely a the idea that it's a WYSIWYG, what you see is what you get product is not necessarily true, which was true of many content management systems actually, which is what you do in the back end is not exactly what you're going to see on the front end. So that in itself can sometimes cause some issues, and also as well, a lot of people are a lot of methodologies is mobile first, and Page Builder isn't mobile first, or certainly when you're designing in the back end, it isn't mobile first. So you're looking at the desktop version of what your page will look like. The only way you can really test that to see what it looked like on mobile is to actually load it up and go onto the front end and then look at it as if you were looking on a mobile. So yeah, there's still, I know some of these things are in the pipeline on the roadmap, still lots of improvements, but like you say, it's it was always a massive leap forward from what was there before, which was for the age we were in, or the age we are in, was woefully kind of inadequate for what merchants needed, and Page Builder, you know, gets nearly there. You know, we're
Yeah.
still got its quirks, but tell me something in Magento that doesn't have a quirk, and I'll I'll tell you. You know, it's a complex piece of software. There's lots of quirks. It's part of its charm.
Deryck, as a Magento master, Magento is perfect and there's no shortcomings in it. And everybody should use it all the time.
Did you have to sign that? Did you to get?
Yeah, you know, and I think the idea of Page Builder is to bridge that gap that a lot of other platforms now are, let's use the word encroaching, like they're encroaching on some of the territory in terms of CMS that Magento has always been weak on. So having the ability to do a lot of these drop and drag and WYSIWYG functions are really important. So, and we are going to see, like I said, we're going to see continued improvements on Page Builder. We're going to see a lot of improvements on how Page Builder interacts with PWA Studio. And I think that's really going to differentiate Adobe and other platforms in terms of headless. If we can directly manipulate content inside of Magento admin, and then it works well inside of a PWA, that is really going to be a great feature that works well for a lot of clients.
Yeah, and actually, and one thing I'd say, you know, when I have trained on Page Builder as part of, you know, it's a subset of some of the courses that we deliver. You know, you show them the features, show people the features if they've never used it before, and you can show them building a dynamic page out. Within, you know, a couple of minutes, they can have a, you know, what looks like a, you know, a fantastic front page with, if they want carousels or scrolling banners, they can. If they want to have a subset of products on there that they're trying to promote at that time, they can. And you know, it's great how quickly you can just drag and drop that in and off you're running with the page. So it's got its foibles, but it's a great product, and I stand by it as a product. I just it's just managing that expectation and that understanding from what the merchant can do and what they need to communicate with the developer if they're doing anything that's maybe kind of outside of the standard kind of templates and that kind of thing.
Yeah, and I know we didn't mean to make this the Page Builder hour, but it seems
no, we didn't, did we?
Yeah, so it does lend to the importance of that, and to continue down that road, merchants should be looking at using Page Builder on their category landing pages, on their product pages, and all their static or dynamic blocks. There's so much that you can be doing. Yeah. And going back to the Magento Commerce Business Practitioner, which I believe both of us are, that we should have an understanding of where those pieces should go in. And I think the really important part for merchants to understand is how you can use that to better your site and self-manage your site. So I think that as an agency, we always want our clients to be able to take that site and go with it on their own. So they're not dependent on a developer to have to do something. And the reality of Magento now is that when you have to build something and then develop it, it has to be QA'd, it has to be UAT'd, it has to be pushed to a live environment. And that is a lot of steps. And nothing like that happens in maybe it takes 5 minutes to actually do that CSS change, but then that CSS change has to go through that whole continuous integration pipeline, all the way to the point of getting deployed to a live server, and that could take a couple of days. So
yeah, but sometimes where I see that done though is you can actually within the Page Builder component, you can from the admin, you can put some custom CSS in there, and it's just, there's an actual, you know, a field to put in your custom CSS. So you end up getting the developer going, I'll just stick it in there, because they don't, you know, so they don't tell the client that, so the client then tries to recreate that somewhere else, and it's completely different, and they think they've done it exactly the same. and then go back to the developer and say, oh no, you need to put this CSS in. It's like, well, they're not going to know that. that's
right.
So that's the sort of thing the sort of anomalies that you can get on that. Yeah.
Right. All right. So I think we've talked about Page Builder a lot, and maybe we just have another 1 hour episode just on Page Builder in the future. I think another really good product right now that Adobe has integrated into Magento is Adobe Sensei. And I'm very excited to see some of the new things that are happening in Adobe Sensei, and how that's going to interact with the Magento Commerce product. And I think specifically right now it's recommendations that are doing that, but there's going to be so many other things that Sensei will be capable of doing.
Yeah, I think they're talking on the roadmap about search being part of Sensei as well, and and there's so much more that Sensei can do than just do product recommendations. I mean, it's a very smart piece of software. I think at the moment they just gradually bring it into Magento, but it'll be interesting to see, how much of that functionality gets brought in.
Yeah, it's almost like Skynet.
It is, yeah. So some of the examples I've seen is being able to upload photos, and then it automatically detecting what the main focus of that photo is. So when you're looking at it on a mobile device, it's looking at that main focus of it, rather than and then on a desktop maybe the picture's a lot wider. So I don't think that functionality has been brought into Magento yet, but as and when it does, that'll be an interesting way to go as well.
Yeah, at the last Adobe Summit, they do something. This was in 2019 when we actually could do things in person. But they do something called Adobe Sneaks, and it's kind of like what Magento Innovation Labs used to be. And they had some specific things that Adobe Sensei was doing, and some of them was making the photos into 3D, which was super cool. So they gave some examples of some canyons, and it looks like you're kind of flying over the canyon, and it's just from a regular flat picture. They also gave examples of being able to pick out dogs out of pictures, just picking things out of huge catalogs of pictures, which does mean that eventually that we should be able to upload a catalog of photos, and that Adobe Sensei would theoretically be able to tag that photo with the correct product inside of your Magento catalog. So you wouldn't have to map photos. I'm sure there'd be some manual things, but the bulk of that work could be done by Sensei. So you wouldn't have you could be uploading photos, and it could be automatically assigning photos to the correct product in the future. And I think Facebook already has this 3D thing where it's automatically turning into 3D.
Yeah, I've used that a couple of times.
So let's move on. We won't take up everybody's full hour today, but I think one thing we wanted to talk about is the new certifications that have come out from Adobe. You did comment on subject matter expert, and how a subject matter expert is different from a regular expert. And I still don't understand what the difference is, but let's just review the main changes. And there is 8 certifications now in Adobe. The first one is the Magento Commerce Business Practitioner, which was the Magento Solution Specialist in the past. And that would be the general one for merchants, or for people that work in project management. Would be a great one to get that.
Yeah, well, I mean that certification is, it's anyone who, I think anyone who is a professional using Magento, who is not a developer, should really be aspiring to get that certification. That demonstrates that you know the product, you understand the e-commerce, you understand the architecture of Magento. You don't have to be an expert in the architecture. Stress that. you just need to understand the core principles of architecture, and understanding the difference between cloud and on-premises, and commerce edition versus open source. And so all of these things, that particularly if you're working in an agency, but also that is, like you say, the project manager, the account manager, people who liaise between the customer and the customer and the developer. That's the qualification they should really have. And I would argue that it's probably the broadest in the sense that it's probably one of the hardest qualifications to go for, because I think with a developer qualification, there's a lot of you should understand the methodology and things that you're going to come across as far as how Magento is built. But with the solution specialist, commerce business practitioner, you've got a much broader areas of subjects that you need to cover. So but I think getting it is definitely kind of proves that you must have a certain degree of Magento knowledge, and it should be reassuring to your customers then as well.
Yeah, and I think the key there too is you don't have to know how to code, but you'd have to know where the difference is when you should know how to code. Mm-hmm. So it's kind of like, this should be coded and this shouldn't be coded. You don't have to know how to do the coding.
And it's knowing things like where you should be looking for an extension versus where you need to customize it. And you're never going to know all of those examples, but you should have by going through that process, you have the intuition to know where that needs, where you need to do research into that. But I'm running a study group on it at the moment, which is still a Magento certified solution specialist study group, even though it's for the business commerce practitioner.
I think a good point there is the solution specialists would help the developers understand part of that coding piece, but they also should be able to guide the merchant on what would be coded and what should just be bought from the marketplace. And I think a great interview with somebody at an agency would be, let's say you have 8 or 10 project managers on your team. Does every single project manager understand every single part of Magento so they can tell the merchant that this part is an extension, or this part needs to be custom coded, or this part's built in? I mean, it is really complicated. And I think that, certainly a business practitioner should know the bulk of that, but just by describing that those 3 big buckets of things that could happen on your site, it is really complicated and does lend a lot of value to a merchant.
Yes. Yeah. And for some merchants, it would probably be valid for them to go through that certification as well. If they're particularly larger merchants, to have that expertise in-house and to have that knowledge of when do I pick up the phone to the agency, or whatever it is, or how far can we go in-house before we then need to do that, rather than the how do I create an attribute again, or that element of it's not just time wasted as far as you're gonna have to you have to pay for time for the agency to investigate it, but it's also obviously the time wasted in the lead time between asking for a resolution and getting a response. So there's lots of benefits in even just pursuing that just as a aspiration, even if you don't end up going for the exam itself.
Yeah, and I think there are a lot of training courses that lead down that path to make that better. So there's the advanced sales and marketing, there's the catalog management, there is a page builder course. There's a lot more to it than just that certification. So looking at that catalog of courses that Adobe offers is another great way to get some really good value out of what Magento can do for you.
Yes. Yeah.
All right. So I know from the developer side, one of the things that they've done is that they made, let's just say they pushed them up market a little bit. So the Magento Associate Developer is now the Adobe Certified Professional Magento Commerce Developer. Yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
So yeah,
And
yeah,
the old Magento professional developer is now Adobe certified expert Magento commerce developer. So, I mean, I guess as the acquisition has happened, you now get a job boost because you've gone from an associate to professional, right? And as a professional, you've gone to an expert. Um, and so
yeah,
we are gonna talk a little bit about the next one, which is the certified master Magento Commerce Architect,
yeah.
which sounds really fantastic. And when I saw that, I was like, oh, that should be something I should get, because that seems like an architect would be the type of that should be the one that's above the business practitioner in my view,
Hmm.
not a master coder.
Yeah, yeah. It kind of seems like that's the, yeah, that's like, you know, yeah. I, 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 I'm an architect, so I've kind of like got the vision. And actually, it's more than that, isn't it? Well, it's developer plus basically. So, but my confusion on that though, when I first saw that was that, well, that's a Magento master. And and obviously we've had Magento Masters. You're a Magento Master. VJ's a Magento Master, and that's coming to not your the that isn't going to be used anymore. But now it is being used, and now a Magento Master is a architect.
Yeah, it does lead to quite a bit of confusion.
Hmm.
And I would hope that they would have another sort of certification above the business practitioner, which should be titled Magento Commerce Architect. And I think in general, most e-commerce would have an architect that maybe isn't a developer, or at least does some development but doesn't do the
Doesn't
degree of
need
development that
yeah.
Professional Plus would do.
Yeah, it does seem really odd that, because it's but I'm sure there was a lot of thought went into it, but yeah, it's implying like a management role rather than an expert developer role, which is what that qualification is. But yeah.
Yeah, so they also have Adobe Certified Expert Magento Commerce Front-End Developer, which was the old front-end developer. That's pretty straightforward. They had talked about doing an associate level of front-end, but I don't know if that's going to happen anymore. And then, of course, the Adobe Certified Expert Magento Commerce Cloud is the old Magento Cloud developer. And I think that's a little bit confusing as well, because I think the Magento Cloud is more about DevOps than development. But I guess you need some development background in that to know that. But I
Yeah,
think the other,
when we have inquiries about Magento Cloud, it tends to be companies wanting to know how they set up instances, it's not normally about development. So you're right there. I think that there's almost like an opportunity there to have a version of that that's maybe just a shorter version that just deals in that aspect of it, and doesn't touch the development side. But
right.
actually, you mentioned about the associate front end, and I think they wanted to do an equivalent for the solution specialists as well, where they had an associate solution specialist, which I think as well that's obviously been either put on a back burner or shelved.
Yeah, I
Uh,
think you're right. Um, there's a couple of them that I think are going to be deprecated, because the fact that, well, I think number one, Magento is going to go headless, and the JavaScript exam is going to become redundant, because it's going to be done in React or Vue or some other front end language that doesn't have anything to do with the JavaScript exam. That's also a little bit confusing. And then there is an order management exam that is probably really, really focused on a few people that would need to do anything in order management.
Yeah.
But I think, to be honest, those just came through because they were already done as exams and done as certifications.
Yeah. Yeah, that's probably true. I can't imagine the demand's massive for those at the moment.
So where do we find all these? You can go to learning.adobe.com and it's certification.html, and then just click on the Adobe Magento Commerce section. You can see those certifications, and those leads you to the exam that you could take. And both Deryck and I have been involved in helping to write content, or involved in helping with the content for some of these exams, and helping in keeping it updated even. There's been a group of Magento people in the community that have been involved in that have helped make those exams what they are. And I know Peter Manichek was very, very influential in making sure that the exams were very high quality and high caliber. Yeah, so I don't think today we don't have any other topics other than that, and again, our page builder rant, or not even a rant. It was good. We were all over page builder.
It was constructive. It was but I think with all of these things, it's like there's it's from my point of view, it's quite useful to know that other people are having quirks with these things, and that it's not that it's not you going insane, and that kind of comes across, that you see these things, but it's a big old complex product, Magento, as all of these systems are. So it gives us plenty to talk about.
Yeah. So we do have a couple of questions. The first question is from a developer who is asking, what is the first exam, or what is the exam I should get as a developer to become a Magento certified developer?
So I was just about to say the associate developer, but it's not called the associate developer anymore, is it?
No, it's the professional. It's a Adobe certified professional Magento commerce developer.
Yeah. And actually, it's interesting. So because the associate developer didn't have the commerce element to it. That was the open source developer as well. So interesting, they've tagged commerce in there. Actually, I haven't just kind of twigged that, but yeah, the associate was open source. I think
well, it's interesting that you say that, because we do have a follow-up question that says, will these work with open source? And so the answer is yes. Any certification works with both.
Yeah, and I'm guessing that they've put commerce in there, but it's going to be all based on open source. But obviously, it's exactly the same code base, so it's completely relevant. So it's not irrelevant if you are then going down the commerce route, but it's obviously very relevant if you're doing open source.
Yeah, and I think one thing to keep in mind as for a future conversation to have would be how much of those exams require you to know the commerce version of it. Because I think one complaint, or one critical item in the past has been the availability to access some of those things. And I know the Magento the expert master architect has quite a few commerce questions in it that require you to have access to the commercial product.
Yeah, and likewise with the solution specialist as well, with the business practitioner. I'll get there in the end. That requires a lot of commerce knowledge, and it's a difficult test to do if you don't have access to try things out on commerce. So yeah, and that's going to be a similar picture for some of the developer exams as well. But the associate one, you should be able to do that on open source.
Yeah, and the flip side for that, really the only exam there is at the moment, or the only certification there is, there's a lot of exams you can take, but the only certification is that that business practitioner exam to get it as a, say, a project manager or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
So we're hoping there'll be some more that get us down. The 5-day developer course is designed to be able to once you take that course is designed to have you pass the Adobe Certified Professional Magento Commerce Developer exam. I should make it longer.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think actually when you do the training, you get a voucher at the end to go and do the test straight after. I think that's part of it.
We should probably qualify that. You
probably check that. I'm sure that was the case under Magento U. Maybe it's not under ADS. If that was wrong, I withdraw that comment.
Right.
But yeah. So certainly, that there isn't an equivalent. I mean, that was the whole point as well. I think when they were talking about the Certified Solution Associate exam, was going to be a more lightweight version that was focused towards just open source to get a few more people certified who, because let's face it, certainly more so, maybe less so now, but not everyone has Commerce Edition, and let's face it, not everyone can go that end of the market. So they're kind of, there's not options there unless you can. If you go through the study group, actually, you do get, for the period of the study group for the solution specialist, business practitioner, you do get access to a full working edition of Commerce Edition for the duration of the course. Actually, I think it's for 3 months. You get it for the duration of.
Yeah, great. And I know that you are giving those study groups, and are you doing North America and Europe?
I think on the current one I'm doing, it's North America, India, and someone in Australia as well who gets up at no idea what time in the morning they're getting up at, but yeah, it's all time zones are currently covered on the current cohort that I've got on that one.
Yeah, and I think there's a study group that happens in South Asia as well for developers, not for business practitioners.
Yeah.
So no, I and that study group is about, it's 1 hour a week or 1.5 hours a week that they have to attend the group.
1.5 hours a week for 7 weeks that runs for. So, and the idea is that it's there for those who already know, fair bit. This is not training, it's a study group, so it's just revision, and the idea is that this is guided revision where you're set tasks to perform the next week, which will get you familiarity with maybe some of the lesser known functions of Magento that might come up in the exam. So it's there to help you just refamiliarize yourself, make sure that you're sharp as a button. That's an expression.
No, it's not an expression. Nobody ever says sharp as a. Why would you have sharp buttons? You're going to cut your fingers when you're putting your shirt on. Unless you get razor buttons or something, but then you'd have to have like metal gloves to put your shirts on. I know I forgot it was. So anybody can. So is the idea of this? Sorry, the idea of the study group is that you'd be able to pass the exam at the end. Yeah.
So you should. What happens is, so obviously I think most people who've done any certification will be familiar with the Swift Otter study guides. So the idea is that you at the start of the course you will have a go at the Swift Otter practice exam, and that'll give you an indication of how far off you are and where your areas of weakness are. And then by the end of the course, we've hopefully, plugged those gaps. And then you'll at the end of it, you will, the end of the study group, you will then have another go at that. And hopefully that'll indicate that you're ready to go for the exam. But you're expected to do around about 4 or 5 hours a week of your own study time to do the exercises. But if you do them, and this is the thing that, I can't emphasize enough, when you do it, if you follow the revision, then you've got a really good chance of getting through it, because it does challenge you to do things in Magento that you wouldn't do unless a customer specifically asked you to do. So it is really kind of like pushing the boundaries on what it is you can do from an admin point of view and functionality point of view.
So this, actually, this study group you'd recommend for anybody. I mean, I think it sounds good for project managers, for certainly
Absolutely.
for requirements engineer, for business analysts, and even for developers, so they have a better understanding of how they should be coding things, and having the customer understand what that means.
Yeah, and I'd love to see more developers do it. I think seeing developers go through that process, I would have a lot more faith in a developer who has got their developer certifications and the business practitioner certification, because I know that they have a very good understanding of the product. But you can't go into the study group kind of a Magento novice. You've got to come in with a bit of Magento learning under your belt, and so the managing Magento 2 store, the advanced marketing, the product catalog courses. Not all of them. You don't need to do all of them, but one or a couple of them would be very useful, or just having that time served experience of using Magento.
Great. All right, I think we don't have any more questions and we're out of time. So this is our closing music that's going to start in the background after we edit this. But I thank you. And next week again, or next time, but we are going to have this before October 30th. So we will be interviewing Marcia from Mage Mojo, and it'll be all about events. We're going to talk about Magento events, and specifically Meet Magento, and what is the future of Magento events in terms of COVID, and in terms of in-person, and all those other fun things that are happening now in the world. So
It'd be fun.
All right. Thank you, everybody, and thanks for joining. Have a great day.
Cheerio.